Okay, look, that's not a
This
ridiculous
is the
thing to
caliber
say.
of player
What
that
I'm
we're
saying
dealing
right
with
here
is the facts. I am presenting to you the facts of the matter.
Oh, this is going to be fun. Hello, and welcome into Eric on the Call on 98.7 Roar Radio, WPCZ LPFM at the top of the hour. This is your weekly sports digest discussion and underappreciated and unknown artist spotlight. I'm your host, Eric Evanson, and we have a full slate of sports ahead of us this afternoon. It is an official week one with several teams already on fraud watch in college football after being completely embarrassed over the weekend. The teams already on fraud watch consist of the likes of Clemson and Florida as they got blown out of the water. And, you didn't think that we were just going to gloss over that team. Florida State University, I pose a question to you. What is going on? Oh, my goodness. We'll talk about the Seminoles once again a little bit later on. It's been a long march since February, though, but it is finally here. We are officially 6 hours away from the NFL season, and we kick it off in Arrowhead tonight with a rematch of the AFC Championship from last season, Ravens and Chiefs. Which I'm glad that this is going to be the kickoff to the NFL season, because if I had to watch Cowboys and Giants like we'll have in Week 4, I would lose my mind. Joining me later on to talk about the NFL is one of the great football minds on campus, Chloe Spradlin, so we will hash out who we think is going to win the divisions. And finally, we wrap things up with going over some key scores and series that happened over this week in the MLB. Are the Braves finished? Can the Yankees hang on? And are the Royals out of gas? We'll talk all about those teams and more towards the end of our show. So, we officially had our first full slate of college football, and it did not disappoint. Or did it? I don't know. Depending on where you stand on the matter, where if you hate blowouts, like myself, it wasn't super fun. But, do you know what is fun? Seeing such highly touted teams get absolutely squashed. Georgia versus Clemson was set to be a decent matchup. Decent. But the same problem for the Tigers for the past 5 years reared its ugly head once again, and that being a very undynamic offense. The Gators welcomed Miami to the Swamp and immediately wanted them gone as the University of Miami players began trash-talking Florida to visiting Florida recruits. Oh my goodness. And, of course, we have to talk about the Seminoles once again. What is this team looking like with DJ Uiagalelei at the helm? I think we all have our answer there. We're talking college football next, but first, a little bit of... Welcome back to Eric on the Call on 98.7 Roar Radio. I'm your host, Eric Edmondson, and we are getting ready to dive into our first topic of the afternoon, which is the first official week of college football. Last week, we had an opener that was the Dublin game between FSU and Georgia Tech, and unfortunately for FSU, this isn't the last time we're going to talk about them because they got the spotlight last week, and we are not giving it to them again this week despite the hilarity of their issues. Instead, we're going to focus on the big game at noon, or at least the game that had most of everybody's attention. That would be Georgia versus Clemson. Now, I said that last week that I thought that Georgia had a little bit of a tough schedule ahead of them in the first weeks. Now, did I think that they were going to beat Clemson? Absolutely yes. Did I think that it would be this funny? No. Clemson went out there and, giving them credit, had a strong defensive half in the first half, but I don't know if that's to credit a little bit of nerves on the offensive end for Georgia or besides the point. That defense in the first half was not carried over to the second half because the Tigers allowed 28 points. 28 points to the Bulldogs without their key running back in Trevor Etienne. And now running the ball is only part of the Bulldogs game. But the reason I mention that is because freshman, Nate Frazier came in as a substitution and ran for 83 yards. A comical amount of blunders on the Tigers side, but let's highlight the same problem that has persisted on from last season. The offense. Led by Garrett Riley, there was a lot of hype coming out of camp, but mostly his work with former five-star high school quarterback, the junior QB, Cade Klubnik, and Klubnik is not the answer. He was once again devastating to this Clemson team, and now more than ever, in the state of the program, the team needs to be looking at replacing not only their QB, but their offensive coordinator as well. And Dabo Swinney, at some point, needs to open his eyes and say, look, the game has changed. I have to use the transfer portal, or because if he doesn't, he's going to drown. It's going to be the same frustrating Clemson team we've seen since 5 years. And even with a great talent in Trevor Lawrence, it was still a frustrating march to that title for Swinney and Clemson. So without a uber-talented QB, it seems like this is the true talent level for Dabo Swinney. Georgia, on the other hand, had a lot of eyes on them because they would be without two of their best offensive players from last season in Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, as they were both drafted in this year's NFL draft. But where their holes are on the roster, they seem large, but others have stepped up to fill that void, perhaps. Mention Nate Frazier, along with Colby Young out of the portal and sophomore London Humphreys, both showed impressive chemistry with Carson Beck, who had a very, very solid first outing. Beck, if Georgia stays the straight and narrow, is projected to be a first round pick, as he should be. I think he has a lot of arm talent, but what concerns me the most about Carson Beck is if he can continue to function when he's outside of the pocket. And with a decent Clemson defense last Saturday, he showed that he is just capable of doing that. Looking at other action around the game, it was a standard week one affair for a lot of teams. Ohio State beat up on Akron. Jackson Dart and Ole Miss walloped Furman for 76 points. That's 76-0 shutout. Oh, my goodness. That was mean, guys. And Tennessee had a nice offensive outing, beating Chattanooga 69-3. As the day continued on, however, things got a little wacky. Texas A&M at home folded to Notre Dame as the Irish came out and clean in that one. And Florida welcomed in the University of Miami. And, man, that was a blunder of a game for the Gators. Look, I understand that Florida coming in was not SEC ranked. They're not ranked, but it's an SEC game at home, and you have to respect the SEC. You figured that they're pretty favored. But at the end of the night, everybody was holding up the U's, and as I said in the open, the Miami players, whilst marching off the field, were talking to the Florida Gator recruits in the front row about how they run Florida, and that's just a bad look. And, they have a case to running Florida because FSU once again embarrassed themselves against Boston College this time. Look, last week, I'll give it to Tech. I think everyone underestimated them about how solid they can be, as the Yellow Jackets also won the Marta Bowl against Georgia State over the weekend. But you come back across the pond to Tallahassee against Boston College, and you wet the bed again? This season has spiraled for FSU, and we are even a full 2 weeks of play into a 2 full weeks of play for the rest of the field. Look, I do not see how they can continue to expect good things from DJ Uiagalelei as the QB. He seems like a gas can. Every time he goes out there, he's getting lit up. He's overthrowing people. It is absolutely ridiculous. Look, this is and it's pretty telling. This is a QB that couldn't work in Clemson's skimpy offensive game. In game, it seemed like the Seminoles, could work something out with the score being 14-6, but that drive was completely ruined after Boston College's Max Tucker intercepted a pass from DJU and nearly returned it for a pick six, but instead settled for falling at the 7-yard line, which gave Boston plenty of opportunity to score 2 plays later. Props to Bill O'Brien, who was exiled from the NFL after ruining Matt Jones and the Patriots, but man, this is still an abject failure by FSU. Even with the expanded playoffs, I do not know how you bounce back from 2 back-to-back losses such as this to unranked teams. And the Noles, they might be done for the year after just 2 weeks. Lastly, we will run through LSU and its loss to USC. This marks the 5th straight year that the Tigers have fallen in Week 1. That is a tough pill to swallow, especially entering the 3rd year under Brian Kelly, who has done nothing but disappoint since coming to Baton Rouge. even with the Heisman winner in Jaden Daniels from last year, the Tigers couldn't sniff the playoffs, and now that he's gone, the QB position falls to Garrett Nusseimer, who on Sunday played pretty well. He was 29 for 38 with 304 yards and looked like he knew what he was doing out there like a veteran. He does kind of have this mold as a generic pocket passer. And, with that, LSU is really going to miss Jaden Daniels' legs. And we'll talk about how LSU is going to have to really find an answer in the run game here in a second. Much with the running backs on Sunday, they were averaging 34 yards a carry. That's just, it's going to be pass or bust for LSU, it seems. The secondary also has some work to do, but this game wasn't exactly fully won by the Trojans. It was lost by the Tigers as the Purple and Gold found themselves caught with 10 penalties, 3 of which were personal fouls. And do you know how much of that, added up together in yardage? 100 yards. They totaled 100 yards with the 10 penalties. And, of course, including the personal fouls. The worst of the game being a targeting call on Jordan Gilbert, which ultimately cost the game as it led to the final touchdown for USC. LSU looks to bounce back next week versus Nichols at home in Death Valley, but they'll have to do it without their running back, John Emery Jr., who as of Tuesday will be out for the rest of the season with a torn ACL. It's standard early season around the league with a lot of teams facing, softball squads. A game that I will be watching, though, is Clemson versus App State. I'll see how the Tigers are. I'm really curious to see how they're going to respond. So college football is officially here, but we have to wait just a few more hours until the NFL gets going tonight as we ring in the new season with the Ravens and the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. Next up on the show, I'll be joined by one of the great NFL minds on the Piedmont campus, Chloe Spradlin, as we break down our predictions of the division winners. But first, we head into our next music break and leading. Welcome back to Eric on the Call. Eric Evanson, your host, here with you, getting ready to discuss the NFL with my guest, Chloe Spradlin. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Oh, please. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to talk about NFL. I started screaming when I realized that today was Thursday. It's time for Thursday Night Football. I've been kind of actually twitching a little bit thinking about it.
Oh, we are all really excited. So let's go ahead and get into the division breakdowns. We're going to start with the AFC East. Let's kick it off with the Jets. Look, I think the Jets have a good, talented roster this year, but they're very dependent on Aaron Rodgers. We saw what this team looks like without Aaron Rodgers last year.
Yeah, so with the Jets, I think Aaron Rodgers is old but dependable. I'm pretty sure we can both agree that he's not going to take them to a Super Bowl. I wouldn't bet my money on that. However, I think it's going to be a solid season from them. I can see them finishing in the range of 7 to 11 wins. I think it'll be solid for them, but if you expect them to make waves this year, maybe for Jet standards they'll make waves, but just kind of around the NFL, I don't think they'll do that much.
Yeah, and it definitely hurts the fact that they're in the division with both the Dolphins and the Bills. And the Dolphins this year, Chloe, I think this is their time.
I don't.
You don't?
Not at all.
Oh, but you got Tyreek, you got Tua, you got Jalen Waddle. That offense is explosive. They just got to get it done in the postseason.
Yeah, that's the problem is the postseason. They are honestly like the little brother of the Dallas Cowboys because in the regular season they can do it all. They're fast, they're great, they can beat the crap out of the Broncos. Great, woo-ha. However, in the postseason when it gets cold, Tua don't got it. The second that it hits underneath below freezing, all right, you're done. It's done for.
Put Tua in the defroster. So with winning the division, I would assume you're going to go with the Bills then.
This is tough because I actually have a little bit of a hot take with the Bills. I think Josh Allen's elite, but Diggs gone now. I think they've got assets around them, but I think they're going to struggle this year. I think this actually might be the year that we see Sean McDermott. It's a make-or-break year for the Bills, and I think that they're going to break right now.
We have a lot of make-or-break seasons around the NFL, and also no Gabe Davis with Buffalo as well. Listen, Patriots, didn't even mention them before. They ain't winning nothing, especially starting Jacoby Brissett the first couple weeks of the year, so no. Go ahead and move to the AFC North. We got the Ravens, Bengals, Steelers, and Browns. And discussing this a little bit, let's start with the Steelers. We talked about this a little bit off air. We're both pretty pessimistic on the Steelers this year.
Well, I do believe Arthur Smith is the devil, and I don't see them having a winning season. Of course, we all know that Mike Tomlin, winning season, blah, blah, blah. At what point do you take let's be honest, tanking and getting yourself a decent draft pick so you can rebuild over a 10-8 or excuse me, a 10-6, 10-7, or just like an 8 and whatever season. At some point, if you want to be something great, if you want to be back to the Steelers of old, you're going to have to start tanking. And I think that starts with Mike Tomlin letting go of the reins. It's someone else in charge. And also, by the way, Arthur Smith is the devil. So,
yeah, no, completely agree. I think I would have believed in this Steelers squad a lot more if they were able to pull the trigger on a Brandon Ayuk deal. But unfortunately for them, that did not come to fruition. And look, I don't know how this 2 QB experiment with Russell Wilson and Fields is going to work. Because, look, that makes sense. They want to do the Packers thing. They want to play a QB. Fields is starting caliber.
Yep.
He's better than Russell Wilson, in my opinion.
The Packers' ideology only works when you actually have a quarterback that is needing to be developed. Not saying that Justin Fields can't get better. Of course he can. But Justin Fields he's not the Jordan Love. He's not this young QB that can go in and get developed. He's not going to be a late bloomer either. He's just Justin Fields. I think he's hit that point where he's no longer at that level to develop his game to a step above.
You got to take the training wheels off at some point. So I think we both agree Steelers not actually finishing below the Browns this year.
I also think
so. Let's go to 1 and 2 in the division. Both teams I think are playoff caliber. The Ravens, MVP, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and the Bengals. Listen, healthy Joe Burrow. That's all I got to say.
He's one of the best. He's one of the best when he's healthy. I do question the team a little bit. Obviously, they're not going to be to the caliber of the Ravens. I see them, solid 11 wins this year, but it's going to be either one of those seasons where they start off hot and then they tail off, or they start tailing off, don't have a great start, and then they really get hot. It's not going to be anything below par for the whole season or anything above par for the whole season.
I completely agree. And look, Burrow's going to have a better O-line this year, but I would say, Ravens, then Bengals, then Browns. Browns, no Joe Flacco revenge tour for them, but hey, Nick Chubb's coming back.
Yeah, Nick Chubb's a great guy. I think he's definitely going to be the star of the offense, but I see nothing for the Browns. They kind of they've been a tease for a long time.
Right.
They've just been teasing. They're going to be back. The Browns are back. They're no longer that 016, 017 squad. No, they're just mid.
Run through the South real quick. Not even going to mention the Titans or the Colts because they're not going to do a lot this year. Colts had a late push last year, but I just don't see it this year. But look, Jaguars and Texans. We're both pretty bullish on C.J. Stroud, but can that generational talent that we've been promised from Trevor Lawrence finally break out?
The thing, it's a make or break year for Trevor Lawrence, like we've said about so many players, so many teams this year. If Trevor Lawrence does not have that make or break year, we're going to start calling him a potential bust. We're going to start calling him one of the most overhyped players. He's got this big old paycheck. He's got the beautiful, long, luscious hair. I think he's just a hair merchant at this point. Unless he can produce a winning season and take them deep into the playoffs, he's just going to be a beautiful hair guy, and that's it.
You know what? You said it in full there. Look, this guy's big paycheck guy. But, I mean, Jaguars, they have talent around them. But like we said multiple times, it rests on Trevor Lawrence. Can he do the thing? Meanwhile, in Houston, surprise of the year last year, C.J. Stroud really broke out, and now you add a weapon to that. Can you keep the diva levels of Stephon Diggs down to where he pairs well with Nico Collins?
Diggs is going to be the tipping point of whether they go on the scale of success or the scale of, oh my goodness, what a flop. I 100% believe that C.J. Stroud is the truth. He's the future of this league, and I believe if Diggs can cooperate with the organization, with the offense, and they can be a fluid movement, they will go to the AFC Championship. I'm saying it right now. The Texans, never in my lifetime have I ever said that the Texans will be legit.
I completely agree. A good enough defense to let the offense work. In the West, you have the Broncos, Chargers, Raiders, and Chiefs, and this is going to be a pretty interesting division. Look, I don't believe in the Broncos at all. I am like, I don't know if I'm on record, but I'm very negative with Bo Nix. If he's not good this year, then he's not going to be good. He has too much college experience to prove that he can be an okay NFL quarterback. But if he's not good this year, he's just not good.
Yeah, Bo Nix to me, I think he's an average QB. I think he's going to be one of those QBs that goes throughout the league. He's going to coast for about 7 years, might be a backup somewhere, might be a starter for a couple of games. He's going to have his 15 minutes of fame this season. He's going to go, 6-10? All right, do-wop, yay. It's not Russell Wilson, and it's not Sean Payton. But,
yeah.
So.
So the Raiders, they're starting Gardner Minshew. Don't believe in them. Unserious franchise at the moment. Chargers and Chiefs. Look, this is a little bit of toss-up because Chiefs had problems in the regular season last year. But do the Chargers have enough to take them over?
No. I think that Justin Herbert is one of the most overhyped quarterbacks in the league.
Can't find his targets.
I don't think he's that special. I mean, obviously we saw that huge downfall in the playoffs a couple years ago against Trevor Lawrence. Justin Herbert to me has always been extremely overhyped. I think he's also a hair merchant. He's a beautiful man, but just because you're a beautiful man doesn't mean you can throw the ball beautifully. And I think that they don't have a beautiful offense. It's just going to be one of those the Chargers are going to do it again this year, and they aren't going to do it again at all.
Yeah. It'll be dependent on their playoff performance as well. I do think they're making the playoffs. They perform usually too well in the regular season for them not to. But I think we both agree, this is the Chiefs division. You have the GOAT. You have Travis Kelce. You have a rejuvenated, I'll say, wide receiver core. And, of course, if there's any team in the history of NFL that can three-peat, it's this squad.
Yeah, the Chiefs, they're unfortunately becoming undeniable. And I think that's to the detriment of the league. But at the same time, like we said before, this is a team that throughout my lifetime, and I would say your lifetime as well, I used to be like, the Chiefs are a poverty franchise. But then some random light-skinned guy with curly hair shows up. And I'm like, what is going on here? I think the Chiefs are legit. I don't want to say it, but they are. I think they might be the pick to win it again this year. They might be my pick.
The devil in Kermit the Frog's voice, Patrick Mahomes. We'll jump to the NFC. Starting off with the East, that's the Eagles, Giants, Commanders, and Cowboys. Eagles. What happened last year with them? I don't think it's going to happen again, but it raises some serious questions about head coach Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, Sirianni is, listen, I think in terms of culture, he's perfect for that team, but it's coming a point where, all right, is their offense getting stale, or they need a rebuild, a revamp? I want to see a rejuvenated offense or rejuvenated ideas in general, offense and defense, from the Eagles. I think that they just got a little too stale. Obviously, that huge loss streak, I actually predicted them to lose to the Bucs in the playoffs, which was one of my biggest pulls ever. But, yeah, I think that Jalen Hurts is a great QB, but he's not being given the scheme to show it right now. Curious about no Kelce for sure, but I don't think this is going to be a great season for the Eagles. I really don't.
I've seen betting markets to where it's plus 500 to win the Super Bowl, but also plus 500 for them to go 7-10. Can't forget about them having Saquon Barkley. That'll be good for them. But I do think they make or break, like a lot of teams in the NFL. You got to prove it to see that you got the juice. The Giants are starting Daniel Jones. The Commanders, I like Jaden Daniels.
I do really like Jaden Daniels. He actually was one of my dark horse picks for the Falcons, my personal team. I really wanted him to get there. Of course, he was never going to fall to 8, but I like Jaden Daniels a lot. Unfortunately, I do have a fear that he's going to be kind of like a Anthony Richardson type, like where he starts off hot, he's going to be great, but his athleticism, his mobility might be the detriment to his game as well as the benefit to it.
And something has to be said about Washington not ruining quarterbacks, but temping them down, I would say.
There's definitely a curse. There's a curse.
Some sort of that.
It's something with that field, I guess.
And then we have the Cowboys, who are going to win the division, but they're not going to do anything in the playoffs. We've both talked about it as well. Dak Prescott is not going to deliver you a Lombardi.
Never. He's never going to be that guy for this team. Of course, they locked down CeeDee Lamb, which is the best thing they could have done. I think it actually could be the start of a somewhat rebuild, locking down CeeDee Lamb, get a better quarterback. Dak Prescott is only overhyped because in his first season, he had the Romo O-line. Elliott had the Romo O-line, and that's why they were going crazy, because he had one of the best O-lines we've ever seen. people think that Dak Prescott is still this young QB and he's going to get it
No.
together. This man's almost 30.
Yeah, no, he's up there. He is a veteran QB at this point. So I'm not even going to say it's make or break for the Cowboys because they're just going to Jerry Jones is going to do the whole thing. He's going to say they're all in the offseason and then do absolutely nothing except re-sign one of the guys already on the team, such as CeeDee Lamb, Zeke Elliott. In the NFC North, the Bears, the Vikings, the Packers, and the Lions. Now, this is going to be a duel between the Lions and the Packers. However, I do want to give flowers to the Bears. I don't think they're going to win much this season, but I think they're going to be fun to watch.
So the Bears, yes, fun to watch. I think offensively, it's going to be something we haven't seen from the Bears offensively in a long time. Defensively is the problem for me. They're going to be able to put up points. I don't think they're going to be able to keep points out. So it's going to be one of those where they play bad teams. They're going to be good against these bad teams. They play good teams. They're going to get some upsets, but it's going to be more so like really close games. Those better teams, of course, having more experience at the helm, they're going to trump them. But at the end of the day, I think that the Bears right now are starting something for years to come.
Absolutely, and drafting Caleb Williams first overall was a great decision by them in order to do something over the next couple of years. The Vikings, going into the season, you like them a lot because, as much as I don't like J.J. McCarthy, he's a solid QB. He's a boring QB that can get it done and sometimes find Justin Jefferson. But with Sam Darnold, it's not happening. Sam Darnold, it might be okay for a few games, but overall, he's Sam Darnold.
I think it's only a matter of time until suddenly Sam Darnold is not going to be the starting QB, and then the Vikings are just going to get them this random QB.
Josh Dobbs.
Yep, I think it's I mean, that's traumatizing in and of itself, but I think it might be Josh Dobbs comes back. It's going to be some random QB that is a left pool that randomly just played for some really good team, was a random draft pick a couple years ago. It's just going to be another let's just get through the season for the Vikings. And I don't know how many let's get through the seasons they have left.
It is running low. So here's an interesting one. The Packers and the Lions. I really like Jordan Love. I really like the Packers. But the Detroit Lions just opened the window, and they are really good. And I think Jared Goff is a sleeper for MVP.
I agree with your pick in that Jared Goff is a sleeper for MVP. But give me the Packers over the Lions. Give me the Packers. I think Jordan Love is legit, but I think the Lions, their team is just too much sometimes. Sometimes you just have to play smart football. You don't have to go win all the time. Like we saw in the playoffs this past year. They easily could have gone to the Super Bowl, but instead they were like, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to go for a 2-point conversion 4 times in a row. And you have to be a smart football team. And
I don't think Dan Campbell has that. I think he is all the way to the wall every single time. I agree with that. I think I'm going to go with the Lions steadiness, though, just because I don't know if the Packers have proved themselves just yet. They're there. They're making the playoffs, and I think they have a good run at the playoffs, but I don't know if they have a shot to really win that division. Going to the West, the NFC West, you have the Rams, Seahawks, Niners, and Cardinals. Seahawks and Cardinals are rebuilding, so this is a duel between the Rams and the Niners. Chloe, who you got?
I mean, easily the Niners. I think the Rams, they've got great players, but like I said, I've said this in the past, they sold their soul to win that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They are coming off the tail end of their glory days, I really think, and I think we'll see Cooper Kupp not have one of the best seasons that he's had before. I think Puka Nacua is still going to be great. I think he could be actually in the running for one of the best players in the league, but it's not just going to be one of the best rookies. It's going to be one of the best players now. I think the Rams, the wheels are starting to come off of the Rams. I don't see them doing too much this year.
I do think there is one last ride of glory for Matt Stafford and his group, but I do agree this is the Niners have the most talented roster in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Now the problem is, can they win a Lombardi? Can they win a Super Bowl?
No. As long as Kyle Shanahan is at the helm, absolutely not. Well, Kyle Shanahan is also the devil, but I mean, he's a talented coach. I'm shocked that they have not won one yet, but at the same time,
they had 2 separate chances, mm-hmm. and he's been at the helm since 2017. I do mm-hmm. think this is, if Shanahan doesn't do anything special in the playoffs this year, either something's happening in San Francisco or he's gone.
Yeah. I don't think he'll be gone this year. I don't see them winning. I don't think he'll be gone this year. But I think next year is the make or break. But right now, it's teetering. He's teetering.
Okay. So let's go to our division of expertise, the NFC South, with the Bucks, the Saints, the Panthers, and the Falcons. Let's start off with the Bucks. Baker Mayfield has never once played to expectations in his NFL career. He is a flip-floppy QB. I don't understand the extension he got. I'm very negative on Baker Mayfield.
I think he deserved the extension that he got based on his play last year. I think over the past couple years, I think about that game versus the Rams he had on, I believe it was Thursday or Sunday Night Football. One of the best performances I've ever seen from a QB considering the circumstances. Baker, to me, is going to be a solid, let's just hold it down quarterback. If you think he's going to be legit and take this team to a Lombardi or anything like that, like, let's hold your horses. I think the Bucs are riding high off of beating the Eagles and doing somewhat decent in a very, very poor division. It's just, he's going to be flatline guy, and then at the end of the day, let's go draft or let's go trade for a QB in the season after.
Baker Mayfield definitely has the identity of a stopgap. The Saints are not going to do anything special. Derek Carr is not good.
Nope.
Don't understand the money that he has. The Panthers will be better than last year. I think Bryce Young got a bad rap. I don't believe in Bryce Young. I don't think he is, a very worthy QB, but I think he's going to be better than last year. So
I disagree. I don't think. Listen, here's the thing. They didn't have a first round draft pick at all this year because they sold their soul to Chicago. That's why Chicago looked good this year, and the Panthers have taken their place as one of the most embarrassing teams in the NFL. Sorry, Joe Dennis, if you're listening. However, I think they're going to be potentially just as bad or even worse as last year. This is a ramped up division in terms of the team that we're unfortunately about to speak about. But I think that no first-round pick, they still have an awful, awful owner. I think that their organization just needs, from bottom up, top down, it needs a rebuild. And unfortunately, you have a toddler as your quarterback.
yeah, needs to be bathed in some holy water. And so we get to the Falcons. Chloe, the ever-tortured Falcons fan, look, without even us diving into the offseason that they've had, anything less than winning the NFC South is a failure
100%.
For this Falcons squad.
100%. And it's not just for the squad. It is for Arthur Blank. Arthur Blank, like you said, in the offseason, everything he did offseason-wise was let's win now. Because he's 82 years old. He is getting up there in age, and I believe in the next 3 to 5 years, he's selling the team or he's passing it down to someone that he's very close with.
So, Chloe, let me ask you a question. We both agree that winning the NFC South, not winning the NFC South will be a failure. How far should they go in the playoffs for this offseason to not be a failure?
So, I'm thinking second round. You cannot give a brand new squad, revamped coaching staff 1 year, and then they go win it all. It's not how football works. You have to give them time. However, this team on paper, of course, football isn't played on paper, but on paper is so good.
It's
far,
a veteran
far
squad,
enough.
Chloe.
This
team has seen a lot of days.
Mm-hmm. I'm stressed about it. I, as a Falcons fan with a lot of trauma, am trying my best not to get too high up on what could be, because I once got too high up in the third quarter of some random game in 2017, and I ended up in tears.
I don't remember that game at all.
It's vague. I think it was a dream, actually. More so a nightmare. But the Falcons, like we said, they have to win the NFC South. I believe with that win, they should be doing well in a competitive game in the second round. But if they make the NFC Championship, you're lying to me. It's not going to happen.
I would say that's the ceiling. That's a very lofting ceiling overall in the season. Disregarding division, I think the ceiling for them is an appearance in the championship game.
Mm-hmm. But even then, as a Falcons fan, I like Kirk Cousins. He's to me a little bit better than Dak Prescott. He's not going to win you a Super Bowl, but he's going to be a darn good QB to try and get you there.
I think he has the potential to win a Super Bowl. Look, he's been one of the most unlucky quarterbacks of his entire career. And frankly, his last couple of years in Minnesota, who has he had to throw to? Justin Jefferson. That's about it. Now he has Bijan Robinson, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, Drake London. Lots of guys and lots of options and targets for him to work with. And this has been all offseason. We've been preached how this is going to be a much better ran offense than it was under Arthur Smith.
But we have to talk about the defense, specifically the D-line, because overall, with the Falcons, that has been the biggest problem for not the last 5 years, not the last 10 years, perhaps the last 15 to maybe 20 years. We have not had a solid guy since Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley. And where are they now? Flipping burgers at McDonald's. Exactly. And you cannot just rely on one guy. That we are not getting enough pressure to the opposing quarterbacks, and that defensively, it's just going to hurt us. Even when we had one of the best defenses in the league last year, we were still bottom half, perhaps bottom 5 in QB pressures. It's not good enough. You have to sack quarterbacks to win games, and you have to sack quarterbacks to win championships.
Absolutely agree, but Falcons winning the NFC South is where we have them. We are both very excited for football to get started, and it's starting tonight. So next up on our show, we're going to talk about the MLB this week, the latest results and storylines, as well as some division chases. We lead off with the race in the NL East. Point blank period, it's over. The Phillies gave the Braves every opportunity to come back and take the East, but the Braves fumbled. They fumbled really, really hard. From the less than great offense to the boneheaded managerial decisions, it was a poor last weekend in Philly for the Bravos. We'll also talk about the opportunity to build a lead in the wild card race that the Braves have, with wrapping up a series with the Rockies tonight and the Blue Jays coming up this weekend. In the AL Central, the three-horse race continues as the Guardians have fought off the Royals and now hold a 4.5-game lead on the field. The Mets look to keep on pushing as they are hot on the Braves trail, and with the Reds and the Blue Jays coming up, they have a chance to surpass. And the surprise of the last month are the Chicago Cubs. They are suddenly blazing hot and sit just 3.5 games out of a playoff spot. Stick around because we all have that and more coming up, but before we do, we're going to go into another music break. This one starts. Welcome back to Eric on the Call. I'm your host, Eric Edmondson. We're going to get right into our final segment, which is the MLB. We're going to recap some of the series from last weekend while also looking at some marquee matchups from this weekend. We'll start off locally with the NL East, same as last week, but I promise this is the last time that we will talk about the NL East because it is, in fact, over. The Braves came into Philly and got kicked in the gut after the Phillies took 3 out of 4 of them at the bank. Now, while the Braves had an opportunity on Sunday to split with the Titans, they were 2 for 22 with runners in scoring position and on base. There is plenty of blame to be put on the offense, but mostly there is plenty of blame to be put on the man managing the team, Brian Snitker. Now, before I continue, I will preface managing is a very hard job. You're dealing with all sorts of personalities and cultures, and especially in the case of this year in Atlanta, with 15-plus key players that have gone to the injured list, it may be more difficult than ever. And if I do believe this. If the Braves make the postseason, Snitker should win Manager of the Year. However, Brian is not without his warts, and in the biggest series of the year for his squad, it was amateur hour. Thursday night, the Braves held a 4-0 lead as the Phillies began rallying. Brian Snitker didn't think that it was pertinent with a fully ready left-handed reliever waiting in the wings. Snitker didn't think that it was pertinent to take his 40-year-old right-handed pitcher who was well over 100 pitches out of the game as he was about to face a lefty. Said lefty then hit a ball out for a 3-run shot. Not the only blunder of the night, though. 4-3 game, Grant Holmes, a career minor leaguer, was brought in to face Nick Castellanos. Castellanos has one of the highest swing rates in the MLB, meaning he swings at everything. On a right-on-right matchup, instead of a pitch out of the zone to the most swingingest hitter in the MLB, he grooves a fastball right down the middle, and it is sent out for a 2-run homer, and the game is completely flipped on its head. That set the tone for the rest of the series, and again on Sunday night, Castellanos got to Holmes again as he was brought in to face Castellanos with a game on the line. Again, a nonsensical decision on the part of Brian Snitker. So with that nail in the coffin, the Braves sit 7 games out of first place with with 4 weeks left in the season, effectively ending their NL East hopes. And now they're having to put their full attention towards the wild card because they have a lot of company now with the prevalent Mets and the surging Chicago Cubs, who have won 12 of their last 20, including a 6-game win streak over the Pirates and the Nationals. Now, 15 of those games were against squads under 500, like the Nationals, Pirates, and Marlins, and the Blue Jays. So I think the Cubs are going to teeter off. This little hot streak just came a little bit too late for the Cubbies. But the Mets continue to be real. They've won the series over the frankly fraudulent Red Sox. In fact, they swept them and get a day off before facing off with Cincinnati. New York entering today sit just a half a game behind the Braves for the last NL wildcard spot, with Francisco Lindor continuing to build an MVP case, and the pitching is just starting to glue together. I'd be hard-pressed to say that this team doesn't have a shot. In the AL Central, a little less interesting as the Guardians took care of business versus the surprising Royals. Cleveland now sits atop the division with a 4.5-game margin over the second-place Twins, who, by the way, will see the Guardians next week on the road for a 4-gamer. That'll be in Cleveland. That could be a very pivotal series as the Guardians have a rough schedule ahead of them. They travel to L.A. starting tomorrow for a 3-gamer against the Dodgers, and then are in Chicago to face off against the White Sox. Now, why am I saying that the White Sox are part of a rough stretch for Cleveland? Because it seems as though Cleveland cannot take care of business versus the lowly Chi Sox, and in fact are 5-5 against quite possibly the worst baseball team we as a collective have ever seen. So after that series on the road, they come home to an 8-game homestand, starting with the Rays for 4, and I don't care if the Rays are phoning it in this year. They're still not just going to lay down and let you walk over them. And then the Guardians welcome in the Twins, who by comparison have a much easier schedule, including the Reds, Angels, and an off day in that stretch. KC, on the other hand, has an up-and-down schedule, but what sucks for them is that they blew their last head-to-head opportunity with the Guardians. So division hopes for them are slim, but they still have the wild card as they are 5.5 games up on, again, the fraudulent Red Sox. We have some great baseball to watch this weekend, with Minnesota traveling to Kansas City on Friday. That game will be nationally televised, and of course, that is the start of a 3-game set over the weekend. San Francisco travels to San Diego, who is looking really threatening in the playoff picture these days, so if you want to get a preview of what they're going to look like in the playoffs, that'll be a fun watch. If you're interested in the NL wildcard race, both Atlanta and the Mets will be at home this weekend. The Braves facing the Blue Jays, and the Mets will be facing the Reds. And the marquee matchup, if you're up for some late-night viewing, will be Cleveland versus the Dodgers in L.A. Shohei continues his march for a 50-50 season, and Jose Ramirez of the Guardians will continue a 40-40 pursuit. How about that? Jose Ramirez. With the AL East race, both the Yankees and the Orioles are facing under 500 opponents, and both sturdy opponents. The Yankees will take on, as I said, a very hot Cubs team in Wrigley. Meanwhile, the O's are at home versus the Tampa Bay Rays. I already talked about how I feel about the Rays. Either way, I think that the AL East race is going to be decided on the second-to-last series in the regular season. Both of them are going to make the postseason, so with them making it, we'll give you a look at what that looks like right now. Starting with the AL, the East is led currently by the Orioles, with the Yanks a half-game back, and the Central is being held by Cleveland, holding a 4.5-game lead over the Twins. In the West, it's Houston's division again because the Mariners are a dumpster fire, and your 3 wildcard teams currently are the Yankees, Twins, and Royals. And, of course, depending on how some things go in the next few days with the division, those teams can flip-flop with a division leader that is currently leading their respective division. The Red Sox are 4.5 games back of that last wildcard spot, but I'm not confident in them. In the NL, you have the Phillies holding the 7-game lead over the East. They're winning that one. Same thing in the Central with the Brewers, who I have not mentioned, but they hold, I believe it's a 9-game lead on the second-place Cubs. The West is being led by the Dodgers as they hold a 5.5-game lead over the Friars, and the NL wildcard race looks like this. San Diego and Arizona are battling for the 1 and 2 seeds, but they are firmly in the playoffs, and under them are the Braves, hanging on by a thread in the race, as the Mets are just a half-game back of Atlanta. I mentioned the Cubs, who sit behind the Mets, and they're red hotness at the moment, but again, I do not see that sustaining. We're getting ready to wrap things up here, so to do that, we're going to roll into a little bit of news and notes. As I said earlier in our college football talk, LSU running back John Emery Jr. will miss the rest of the season, or I should clarify, is expected to miss the rest of the season with an ACL tear that he sustained while practicing on Tuesday. Very unfortunate. You never want injuries for a player, but for Emery, it will be his second ACL tear as he tore his right ACL against the Florida Gators, playing only 7 games in that year last year. So hopefully he'll be able to rebound from that a little bit, but it seems as though his college career may be done. Staying in college football, this is something we all saw coming a mile away, but FSU has dropped out of the top 25 amid the 0-2 start to unranked teams. That's all I'll say on them, is because we have exhaustingly covered the Noles. Trent Williams ended his standoff with the 49ers, agreeing to rework his 3-year deal for about $82.66 million. That's great and all, but because of the holdout, Williams will have to pay $5.34 million all in fines. On a feel-good note, Damar Hamlin will get his first start since his incident on the field last year, where he was hospitalized after being pronounced dead on the field. An incredible story for the fourth-year safety. In WNBA news, after a 7-year drought, the Indiana Fever have made the playoffs, and of course, their first overall draft pick in Caitlin Clark has helped them get there along the way. And now it's all about how deep of a playoff run can Clark and the Fever make. Finally, in the MLB, after getting hit in the head by a 94-mile-per-hour fastball, Braves infielder Whit Merrifield went off on the state of how MLB pitchers can threaten injury on batters with no repercussions because of how fast they are throwing. And on a personal note, I completely agree. You know, I understand your job is to get the batter out, but if you cannot control a high and tight fastball, then you do not need to throw a high and tight fastball. It is completely unacceptable. Merrifield will be out for a couple days. There's a big welt on the back of his head, but hopefully, and all points indicate that he is going to be all okay. All right, well, it is getting about that time that I get on out of here. So, make sure that you tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a frenemy. And again, I thank you for joining me. We'll be back at it same time next week, same place as well. So, again, tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a frenemy. Let them all know that Eric's on the call, and I hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe, make good decisions, watch sports, and as always, have a good one.